Let's talk.
Hey y'all, it's Mamaw, and I'm off the porch today with Todd Achilles, who is running as an independent for the Senate in Idaho. And I really wanted to talk to you, Todd, about, if I may call you Todd,
Yes,
one of
please.
these days I will be calling you Senator. Um, but I'm really fascinated with this movement by independent veterans. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But first of all, I want to hear about you. Who are you? What's your background, and what made you decide to jump into this?
Yeah, no, Mama, I appreciate the time to be able to do this. I'm a farm kid from Oregon. Grew up on a little family farm. I was that kid raising sheep in the 4-H club. Uh, After college, I did a couple years on active duty as a tank commander and armor officer, stationed at
Bless your
lovely Fort
heart.
Stewart. I know. Well, as a skinny 5'9" kid, being an armor officer is not that bad of a deal, actually. But and then when I got out, I got into the wireless industry. So I spent 20 years in the tech industry, T-Mobile, Hewlett Packard. Had an opportunity to run big global business
Hmm.
units and do all kinds of good stuff. But throughout this, I had this non-desired return to public service. It was just kind of chipping away at me. And I finally left Hewlett Packard, went back to school at UC Berkeley to get my master's of public administration. And they asked me to stick around and teach, and I kind of started teaching public policy after that. Uh, given my background, a focus on tech policy and anti-monopoly and corporate power and things like that, and the impact on democracy. And then when a seat came open in my neighborhood in Boise, a seat for the legislature, that is, I raised my hand, got appointed by a Republican governor, Governor Little, and then I ran for reelection last year in 24.
Hmm.
And I got, my district's only 25% Dem, and I got 60% of the vote. And I'll tell you, the number one thing I heard when I was knocking on doors, particularly Republican doors, is, "Man, Todd, you're a better Republican than that crazy on the ballot." And of course, I was running as a Democrat, and in Idaho, I've been registered as a Republican longer than I have as a Dem. I grew up in a Republican household, um,
But it was the
but
old school Republican.
exactly. And now, honestly, the lines have blurred so much. I mean, what's it? The longest serving governor in Idaho was a Democrat, Cecil Andrews. And
Hmm.
man, that guy could hunt and fish like nobody's business. And that's why folks loved him. And then we've had some old school Republicans that have led this state, and it's really hard to understand what the lines are anymore. And I think you take that reality of Idaho politics, and then you look at what's happening in Congress and just the dysfunction of the two-party system. And let's be honest, I served as a Dem, but there's as much corruption within the Dem party, the corporatist Dems in Congress, as there is on the Republican side. And it's just all bad. And so the theory behind running as an independent is that you can break through that corrupt two-party system and finally bring some change to get Congress running again. It only takes a couple of us independents to be able to do it.
I have noticed in going to all of the protests, well, actually, I call them rallies, um, throughout this past year, is that young people, especially, are adamant they are not Republican, they are not Democrat, they are independent. They may identify more as a progressive or a conservative, but they're really holding that space. And in
Yeah.
the past 20 years, we've seen a dramatic drop in either party to where the independents people now in Ohio, they tend to skew more Republican, but not always. I mean, Ohio
Mm.
went for Obama. So I think that you may be onto something because what people don't understand is veterans are into public service. It's the
Yes.
service. And our forefathers, as you well know, as a historian too, is that they never intended for us to make a career of public service. It was something, it was a duty. You go do your duty and then you get out. So What is your feeling on some of the voting rights issues? I sent you what I had 1,000 respondents do, but one of the overarching things on that was people forgetting about the public service part of it.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I was nerding out over the weekend and reading Washington's farewell address from 1796, right, where he warned about geographical divisions and political factionalism and the rise of parties. And he was deeply concerned that, and the Constitution was only 8 years old. And he was deeply concerned that that was going to tear apart all of the hard work that they've done to get the country that far. Uh, and I think it's the fastest growing group of voters in the U.S. right now are unaffiliated voters.
Yes.
They're just tired of both political parties. Um, and it's interesting in Idaho. Listen, we're Idahoans. We're fiercely independent. You don't move out here if you want to like follow somebody, right? You move out here to, live on land and enjoy the West, and you get some remote parts of the state where you don't see anybody. Uh, and in 2012, when we closed our primaries, 70% of Idahoans were unaffiliated with the party. 70%. That was by far the highest in the country. Uh, and Boise State University does this public policy survey every year. And the last one, they asked people to kind of self identify. Basically, two-thirds self identified as
Mm-hmm.
independent, or I'm a Republican, but I lean independent. Um,
Right.
so you look at Idaho and you're like, wow, that's just an insanely red state. But you pull back a couple layers and you realize that's really not the case. It's a conservative state. It's a center right state, always has been, always will be. Um, but how do you, going back to your first question, to what degree do Republicans still represent those center right values?
Well, and it's also the Democratic Party the same. I mean, they called us snowflakes. My husband's son and I are all veterans. We are all responsible gun owners. I was a sports shooter, even was on the rifle team at Ohio University. I mean, it's just something we like to do.
Yeah,
So, this whole concept of, you are either this super left snowflake or you've got to be to the MAGA right. And most of the country, as you just said, is really in the center. Some kind of skew a little bit more conservative, some,
yeah,
but we're dead center, and we've got to get back to that. I also feel there's nothing wrong with taking care of people's health and making sure that they have social safety nets and those kinds of things. But you go to college to get your feelings hurt. This whole thing of you can't talk because I don't like what you say is
yeah,
gone too far as well.
yep, 100%.
So, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was Citizens United and the cash flow that's going into our politics. And since you're running for Senate, you're going to get hit up the side of the head with that.
Ugh. The amount of money in these races, it's just ridiculous. I was talking to somebody that's considering running in Florida, and the budget he was folks told him would be $150 million for a Senate
Mhm.
seat in Florida. I mean, and look how much
That's
was spent in Montana. Little old
Well, there was
Montana.
almost 200 million spent in Sherrod Brown's last race
Oh, that's right.
with
Yeah,
Bernie Marino. Yeah, it's
yeah.
just extraordinary. And you think of what you could be doing with that money.
I know that too. It's. I mean, particularly in the smaller states that are really they're cheap media markets. This out of state money it just a an exponential effect, and we saw this around one of the issue in Idaho politics in the last cycle in 24, which is there's national groups pushing for these school vouchers, right?
Yes, we
To
already have
take
that fight.
Yeah, you guys have that. I mean, we had been holding it off in Idaho, and we had enough of a balance in the legislature of folks who said we don't want to do this. So, the out of state voucher groups came in, and they just flooded local election, legislative elections with out-of-state dollars, with just horrible things against some of the people with the most the deepest, finest values I've ever met, who were running in politics for all the right reasons, just saying horrible things about them, and they lost their primaries. And so the whole legislature just shifted. Basically, net loss of, call it, 7 or 8 seats. That was enough to shift the legislature where the pro-voucher lobby had the votes. And guess what happened? Vouchers passed at the last session of the legislature entirely due to out-of-state dark money. And these are just legislative races, right? You take it up to the
And
next level, and I mean, it's
and we
bad.
had
I
the
mean,
same thing in Ohio, and these are backed by the Koch brothers and the
yeah,
DeVos family. And
yeah,
it's like, what other reason for voucher systems? Because when you live in Appalachia, we don't have all these schools to go to. And just got back from Idaho. Rural
yeah,
Idaho, you have the same issue. So why are we depriving? It's not that our students are dumber than anybody else, they don't have the opportunities these other areas do. And then you take that away. Um,
yeah,
so I just wanted to prepare you for the dark money that you're going to get hit with. But I
yeah,
think
yeah.
people, I really, really think people are starting to get onto it and they're learning about looking those up and doing those things. Um, I'm a constitutionalist. Have my little classes on the Constitution all the time. What did it mean to you when you swore your oath to the Constitution?
You know, you make a commitment to those founding principles, right? And it's
Did it have an expiration date?
no, no, ma'am, right? I mean, how old were you when you took the oath?
The first time I was 18.
Yeah, I was 19, and uh, you know, working in the tech industry and everything else, I kind of forgot about it. But as this, you know, this desire to return to public service was gnawing at me. I went back to that and I looked at that oath I took, and you know, and it calls you, it calls you to serve, uh, and I mean, and it's the same thing I think with veterans. To your earlier point, that we served in units, and every military unit's the same thing. It's a bunch of random people just thrown together, right?
Isn't it
You have
great?
no control. I know, and it's. I mean, my first platoon. There were more Puerto Ricans in my first tank platoon. There's only 16 men in a tank platoon. Well, they're men and women now, but back in my day, it was just men. There were more Puerto Ricans in my tank platoon than I ever met in my life as a farm kid from Oregon. I mean, and it was, you know, and I learned a ton. It was this great group. And, you know, my first tank crew was um, Specialist Johnson from Baltimore, Specialist Priester from South Carolina, and Corporal Douglas from Louisiana, and me, this goofy kid from Oregon. Uh, but, you know, in a tank crew, if you can't get along, you're dead. And I just that's the philosophy we need. We've got it's too easy to live in these little bubbles and these little subcultures. We got to break out of that and just serve everybody.
My husband, and it's hard to wrap your head around knowing 17-year-olds today, but he was 17 when he went to
Mm.
Vietnam. I keep telling people, 17 years old from a farm in rural Ohio. And to this day, he said, people don't understand. I wasn't fighting for this big thing I didn't understand. It was the guy that I had met and been through basic with that was there with me in the front line doing it. That's who you fight for, no matter
Yeah,
what.
yeah,
And when you see blood, it's all red,
yep,
no
100%.
matter what.
That's
And I
exactly it.
think people have forgotten that. And so we have this big rift. So, speaking of big rifts in the military, since you will be in the Senate and hopefully on the Armed Services Committee, because we need more real soldiers there, what would you say to Pete Hegseth? Old Petey
Pete's
Pie, my.
fundamentally on. I'm sorry, I
Go
jumped the gun
ahead.
on this because he's
Amy
fundamentally
McGrath and
unfit.
I, listen, we toasted that dude.
Yeah, you know, there's a a colleague of mine in the Idaho legislature. We both served the same time in the '90s. He was a West Pointer, grew up in Pocatello in southeastern Idaho. We wrote an op-ed when Hegseth was coming up for his nomination. It just he's fundamentally unfit. And we've seen that. I mean, this guy is just performative. He doesn't have the substance. He doesn't have the experience. Just all of the stupid shit like renaming it the Department of War, which is going to cost, what was the number, $2 billion?
At least.
I mean,
And it's going to
what?
be turned back around. And why would you call it war?
I mean, and it's just again, it's this. He's performing, and we don't
Can
need performative leaders. We need people who understand what needs to happen and to keep the country secure. That's it.
can you imagine anyone, especially someone who after 24 years only made it to an '04? You and I both know what that
Yep.
meant. People not that somebody said you talk too military. Well, yeah, but we know we got an inside
We know.
track. And lecturing these generals from academies and stuff on how to be a warrior, and then to get rid of women and people of color who are of rank.
Yeah.
It just is mind blowing, and I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah. Well, Hegseth is part of this Christian nationalist church with its headquarters up in northern Idaho, in Moscow, Idaho. This is the church under Doug Wilson. Uh, and this church has grown, and they've been trying to take over Moscow's where the University of Idaho is, and they've been trying to take over that town. But Hegseth is part of this group, and uh, I mean it's a church built on a theory that mediocre middle-aged white men should be the center of society. Developed by a bunch of mediocre middle-aged white guys. Go figure. And I
Mm,
just, it's anti-woman. It's I mean, it's pro-white. It doesn't value the strength of the diversity in America, and it's everything that's wrong. And Hegseth is part of this thing, and it's just like the the female, the incoming commander for one of the SEAL teams. I think this was
yes,
last week
wasn't
or the
that
week
awful?
before.
Yes, week before
I know.
last.
I mean, my God, the career that she's had, the sacrifices she's made, the level of professionalism, and I don't think a lot of people realize that when you get up into, Colonel, General, '06 and above, I mean, these people are superhuman.
They
They
are
don't
accomplished.
sleep. They can run forever. They're smart as hell. I mean, these are some of the most impressive people I've ever met. I remember I don't know about you, when I was a young lieutenant, I mean, the lieutenants in my battalion, we'd be hanging out. We had this battalion commander. I mean, you just sit down with him and you feel dumb. Uh, and
And you
we'd
thought
be
they were
hanging out.
old, and they're not old.
I know they're what? They're in their 30s. And I mean, we looked at these guys and we're like, I got no chance. I mean, these are some of the most impressive people I've met. Like, I'm going to do my couple of years and I'm going to go find something else to do because these, and they really are. They're absolutely remarkable leaders. It's such a deep commitment to the country and to the Constitution, and to treat them like this um, it just makes me. I just want to barf.
Well, and when he was talking about lowering standards, when I was talking with Amy, she just kind of chuckled. When you're flying an F-18 Hornet, you either can land it on the ship or you don't.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, there's no, let's lower the standards or make it easy. You can either land it or you can't. And when I saw him doing them sissy pull ups, good Lord, I
I
could
know those
still
were pretty
do them,
bad.
and I've got two artificial knees. Come on.
I know. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm actually using this in my race because my opponent, Senator Jim Risch, he brags that he's confirmed 100% of President Trump's appointees. And listen, we can have a separate conversation about President Trump. I think there's some things that he's done well. There's a whole bunch of things that I disagree with him on. But your duty as an Idaho senator, your duty is to the state, and it's to the Senate. And nowhere did the founders intend for you to be a rubber stamp on the White House.
Because you're an equal branch. I keep saying that we have three co-equal branches.
Yeah,
And for some reason, our legislative branch has completely usurped their authority. They've just, here, you take it. Well, you can't do that. You can't give someone your authority. I guess it's because they don't understand the difference between authority and power, but that's a whole nother conversation. We can have at a
yeah.
later time. In the Senate, though, on these confirmations, what are your feelings? And you kind of alluded to that, which is one of my questions on rubber stamping those that are not qualified. And like you said, Hague sets a glaring example just because we understand the military world, but you look at RFK Jr.
Mhm.
and what he's doing to our health care, and Scott Bessent's total lack of knowledge of how the Treasury really works. How do you get around that when you get there?
Oh, I mean, you just need to make it clear that these are not nominations that you'll support, right? We just can't have this amateur hour. And frankly, I don't think they're doing the president any favor either, because these people are so bad at what they do. Uh, and it just makes, it makes President Trump look worse. I think President Trump understands better than most politicians the pain that people are feeling out there. Um, but his folks aren't executing on any of that
Mm-hmm.
because they don't get it. But yeah, RFK, Besson, Hegseth, what's happened at the FBI. I've got a
Oh
friend of
my
mine who he's
God.
actually a Marine Corps officer and then went career FBI. We have lots of conversations about this, and he's talking. He's been out for a couple of years, but he's been talking to his buddies that are still in it. He's just saying it's a shit show. And importantly, by doing all this performative stuff, by taking the FBI out and having them augment ICE and doing these raids and everything else, you're pulling people away from a critical FBI mission of counterterrorism, counter espionage, and listen, our digital infrastructure is it's so at risk of being infected by the Chinese and the Russians and others. And that's the role of the FBI. There's nobody else in the country that's doing that. So when you pull the FBI out of that, then this just becomes a huge gap in terms of who's minding the shop.
Well, and even my husband was a SWAT commander for a federal
Mm,
branch, and people don't realize you're spending 250 to half a million dollars per person in training.
yeah,
And then you're throwing them aside or you're putting them on fancy bodyguard detail or something. And like you said, that is a poor. So you brought up ICE. That was my next. You must have telepathy, or maybe you think that's the way all Army officers go.
that's there we go.
How much has ICE affected, especially your farming community in Idaho?
It's we don't have a big Homeland Security presence in the state. The three biggest federal agencies for us are Department of Ag slash Forest Service, the VA, and then Department of the Interior slash BLM. And that's, the federal government's the third biggest employer in the state of Idaho. Uh,
Hmm.
but there was a big raid a couple weeks ago. Basically, uh, what's the best way to describe it? It was this kind of horse racing um, a club, for lack of a better
Hmm.
term, that was out in one of the ag, more heavily Hispanic areas, and they were really heavy handed. So much so that the local sheriff and the local police chief, uh, they ICE basically took credit for this raid, and it was kids were being zip tied and a bunch of other stuff. It was just awful. And to the credit of the local sheriff and the local police chief, city police chief, they corrected what I said about it. They said ICE is completely misstating. They expressed their concerns about it, and these guys were doing the right thing. It was good to see, but there was a lot of damage done, and ag is the only strategic industry in the state. It's 17% of our economy. We just punch way above our weight from an ag industry standpoint, and frankly we don't have enough people in the state to power our ag industry. So ag immigration is a big deal. There's a shortage of visas. I mean, as you know, the system's just broken.
Hmm. It's broken.
Um, yeah.
And well, that's my problem. We have kept kicking our visa and our immigration. We keep kicking that can down the road, and then we wonder why we suddenly have this explosive bottleneck. So, on the one hand, that is correct. That has to be fixed instead of rolling up our sleeves and fixing the problem.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, we have masked bandits who you don't know if they're really federal government law enforcement. When you
Yeah.
watch these takedowns, they obviously have had zero training. And they are targeting a friend of mine who is of Hispanic descent, but a seventh generation Californian,
Yeah.
retired from the army. She got stopped and held until her daughter went and got her birth certificate because her military ID wasn't enough.
What?
Um, oh yeah, she showed her military ID. She worked at Presidio, and they were like, "Yeah, but people from other countries can work." And I'm like, "Oh my God!" So she had to stand there, call her daughter. So that's going on.
Mm.
And with veterans, or we're deporting people who have fought in a war, which used to be the fast track
Yeah.
to citizenship.
Yep.
We are watching them take Puerto Ricans, and they're like, we're U.S. citizens.
Yep.
Native Americans have been stopped to prove that they're Americans. I mean, there has got to be a stop, and there's got to be. When I was in the military police, you still had to say who you were. You still have to identify yourself. You can't. So when you get to the Senate, could that be something fundamentally that we could start legislation on? Is okay, if you're going to have secret police, they still have to follow under the same rules and guidelines that regular police forces do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we were talking about cabinet leaders who aren't, are operating way above their capabilities, we left Nome off the list. Uh,
Oh, you
but
mean Barbie?
yeah. But listen, we had a lot of conversations about this in the Idaho legislature, and there was a bill last session to basically replicate what Texas had done to make um, undocumented immigrants or undocumented immigration a state crime, which of course it is, and that's fundamentally unconstitutional. And I argued
Right.
against it, but the fundamental piece of it, which I do agree with, is if somebody, undocumented worker is here in Idaho and they commit a crime, they commit a felony, absolutely 100% get them out,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, listen, you got to really work to be able to commit a felony, and there's no reason to have them in the state. That part I have zero issue with, but these guys wearing masks with no identification, going after anybody that's brown, no, that's not how we do things in this country. Fix the immigration system, right? Every open job in Idaho should preference an Idahoan. And if you can't fill it, then we open it up. And we open it up in a transparent way. I mean, for God's sakes, you and I can spend 30 seconds and we can get a ticket to, Brazil if we want to. And there's no reason that a dairyman in central Idaho can't, he's got 20 open positions in his dairy. If he can't get them filled at a livable wage from Idahoans, then great. He can put those out there within the system. He's accountable for those workers. Everything is above board. I mean, this is a solvable problem if you're willing to just, get above the partisan divide and just work together. I think what was it, Langford from Oklahoma? He did a really good job on this thing. He had a good bill, and it got chewed up into politics.
I know.
Just
It was ready to go, bipartisan support, and out the window it went. And
yeah,
they spent several years on that bill to try to get it through.
yeah.
So when Calvin and I were out there, we had kind of a running joke because we hear it all the time. For some reason, Ohio, Iowa, and Idaho, people always mix those three states up. Now, I think part of the reasoning is we don't have accurate maps. So students look at the map of the US and they think, well, Idaho's not that much bigger than Ohio, and they don't realize that it's like four times, I think, bigger than Ohio.
Probably,
Right.
yeah.
But when I got out there, at least for those of us in southeastern Ohio, which is the Appalachian region, and Iowa and Idaho, we actually have a lot in common.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have that grit of survival, as you talked about, from
Yep.
people. We are rural and we're used to doing without when nobody else will cover. But it's also the attitude of both parties on both coasts that we're flyover country.
Yep.
So, as a senator from Idaho, how would you address the attitude from your fellow senators on we're just flyover country? What can we
Um,
contribute?
I think this is part of why serving as an independent makes such a big difference. Because you're not beholden to the party structure. And listen, all the money's on the coast, and both parties are tapping into it. Um, and when you're outside of that money machine, then you're not trying to deal with trade-offs. You've got one responsibility. It's to the people of Idaho, and you fought like hell for the people of Idaho. And I'll tell you one of the things that just that powers me through this campaign is we have two Senate chairs from Idaho, Senator Risch and Senator Crapo. Senator Risch is chair of foreign relations. Crapo is chair of Senate finance. That's two out of the big four Senate committees. One state hasn't had two out of four in at least 50 years, as far back as we can count. So, little state Idaho, we got 2 million people. We are punching so far above our weight right now. And what the hell are we getting for it? We still have a goat trail of a highway that goes north south in our state. Our schools are underfunded. Our hospitals are underfunded. We've got, these guys voting for the one big beautiful bill that undermines
Mm.
Medicaid, right? And 60% of Idaho hospitals are rural. And as you know, in rural communities, you don't have big employers. So guess where people are getting their health insurance from? It's from the health exchange and it's from Medicaid. None of these people are on employer plans. So when you cut that, you're doubling the impact in rural communities. And I tell you what, I've met with hospital leadership in these little hospitals all over the state. Some of the most amazing people you'll see. They are busting their asses for their communities. At the same time, our two senators are undermining the revenue streams that are keeping these hospitals open. It's just unacceptable. You can't do this.
I like your passion. Everybody asks me why I'm interviewing Senate candidates from out of state. And I keep telling them you have to understand while you are the senator from Idaho, once you're in the Senate, everything you do affects all of us.
Yes.
And so we do all have a vested interest, whether we support campaigns out of state, these kinds of grassroots, because you will enable or vote down legislation that affects everybody.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like little mini presidents.
There's
And,
something
and
good with
and
that.
that's well,
That's fun.
that's how I try to explain it to people. The legislative branch, whether it's congressman in Ohio too, or a senator in Idaho, you will affect us in some way in
Yeah.
southeastern Ohio.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's important to help get people moving along that I think are looking out for the best interest of this country.
Well, I appreciate your time on this. And, I just finished uh, uh, hitting all the state. I hit all 44 counties, 51 town halls over the last, I don't know, 10 weeks, something like that. Put about 8,000 miles on my van. I camped out in a whole bunch of Idaho state parks. It was great. But, in having these conversations, and I tell you, I got a lot of red hats showing up in to my town halls. Like I say, I got red hats, truckers hats, hard hats, and cowboy hats coming
There you
coming for the
go.
conversation. And everybody's mad, and everybody sees the same thing. They see the rigged economy that's stacked against, the 99%. They see the corruption in Congress, and they're just pissed because this is not what we all signed up for in terms of being Americans and voting and doing our civic duties. Um, Now, we've got two different theories of how to fix it. One theory is President Trump is the disruptor. He's the FDR, he's the JFK, he's the Reagan, he's the one that's going to fix this broken system. I think that the shine's kind of coming off that a bit
Hmm.
for the 2/3 of Idahoans that voted for Trump. Um, and the Dems just don't make a compelling argument in states like Idaho or Nebraska or the Dakotas. And so this is the challenge, is to bring these folks together, have a conversation, and say, guys, here's the path to how we fix it. You get enough independents in there, you deny the majority to either party, and when you do that, you set the independents set the agenda. And when you set the agenda, we can go after this corruption, we can go after the money. We can get the Senate working again with just a handful of us. And when you get the Senate working again, then you get the Republic functioning again. And I think that's really what people want to see.
They do. Honestly, I've talked to so many people, and I have so many people on my virtual porch, and they just want it to work for them
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
And they don't want to deny people food, which was what happened with SNAP, or health care, or education. And somehow that seemed to be easy fruit. But on the other hand, they don't have kids that can go to Ivy League schools either.
yeah,
So it is a real problem. So, one of, well, the number one issue that we had, and then we'll start winding this up, are voting rights issues. We talked a little bit about Citizens United and political action committees, but this other little catfight we're into in Ohio, I am embarrassed to say, is sucked right in there on this redistricting.
yeah.
Knowing that you aren't in the position to vote right now, but have you considered a federal redistricting to where there are federal guidelines based on voter preferences of that state and make it a federal issue rather than what they're doing now?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the gerrymandering, and listen, both parties are guilty as hell on
Awful.
the gerrymandering, and these just awful districts that are designed to where the incumbent selects their voters rather than the other way around. I we had a citizens initiative in Idaho in the last cycle that there was a veterans group that where our friend Betsy and I worked on for open primaries. It was a top four open primary and ranked choice voting. Uh, we did a very poor job of explaining ranked choice voting, and we got our butt handed to us. But open primaries, I think, are fundamental as part of this protecting voting rights. And in Idaho, there's twice as many independents as there are Democrats. So you've got roughly a third of the voters who pay for a primary in which they can't participate. Wrong,
Right.
right? That's taxation without representation. Uh, so open primaries, it should be a federal law. And again, our federalist system, we're very careful that we let the decisions happen down at the local level. That's the American model. Um, and it works pretty well with some exceptions like Jim Crow and some other things. But
Hmm.
that's as long as we put some guardrails on that. So open primaries, I think, is one thing we can do at the federal level, and give those independents a vote. And then the second thing is we got to end this gerrymandering. And I think there's some really good proposals around proportional representation. So in Idaho, well, there's only two seats in Idaho, so it's not a great example. I mean, but we'll use
Yeah,
we'll
we
use
we have
Ohio. Let's
15.
Yeah, your guys are a much better example. So let's just say the Republicans win 55% and the Dems win 45%. Then you carve up those 15 congressional seats on that with that ratio, and there's no gerrymandering. There's none of these games, and it's just straight down, and it represents the state. And I think that's a necessary reform that we need to do too.
We have in Ohio, I am in Ohio too, which at one point in time it went up to the northern part of Ohio, followed the river around. They kept trying to do this to get rid of Ted Strickland. Now we comprise of 16 counties out of 88 is Ohio
Hmm.
too. And then the other 14 are all. We have a gentleman who's in the Ohio legislature, retired military. He's a JAG officer, going to run against Jim Jordan. And in this last gerrymandering, they cut it up just literally by the street so that he wouldn't run against Jim Jordan because he'd beat him.
Oh, they took him out
I
of the.
took him out, so now he's running back into another district. But it's like that's what they do, and that is
Yeah.
so wrong. And we
Yeah.
have got to fix that. Well, tell
You
people
know,
how
it's.
they
I'm
go
sorry. I was
ahead.
just going to say
No, no.
it's. I mean, there's a fundamental principle to the American system, which is competition, right? There's economic competition. Our economy is more concentrated now than it ever has been. We've got these massive monopolies in tech and ag and all over the place. And we're, all of us are paying a price for those monopolies and a lack of competition on the economic side. It's that same lack of competition on the political side, which has, an equivalent effect in terms of stifling innovation and creativity and everything else. And that's that
Well,
gerrymandering example is a perfect one.
everybody wrings their hand. Oh, they'll get primaried. Well, that's why we have primaries. You're supposed to understand that if this is the job you want, part of it is you will get a primary.
Yep,
And you may lose. That's the political, what used to be the political game. It's
yep,
kind of
yep.
like I don't understand the electoral college in this day and age, why it's not direct vote like everything else. I guess that's a whole nother conversation. As our term limits, I don't think we need people like Chuck Grassley in the Senate any more than we needed Dianne Feinstein in the Senate in their 90s.
I couldn't agree
Let's
more.
see.
Last
I
week I
think
signed
Robert
the
Byrd
term
was in
limit.
his 90s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my opponent's the fourth oldest and the seventh richest in the Senate, which, my God, is saying something for the U.S. Senate.
Boy, you aren't kidding. I don't know if they're turning gray or turning to stone. They've been in there so long. It's like, go. Retirement's not a bad thing.
I
It
know.
really
Hang out with
isn't.
the grandkids, for goodness sake.
Be an elder statesman. Go
Yeah,
do something
good,
other than that.
good
So,
teach.
how do people contribute to you and help you out,
Well,
even if
my
they're not
website,
amongst your state?
well, I appreciate the support. It's an extra level of difficulty running as an independent. We just we out hustle the other side. But the website is Achilles for Idaho.com. So FOR and Achilles just like the heel. But yeah, no, I appreciate support from all sorts of folks and I will make a plug for my three other partners, all military veterans, run as independents for the Senate. Dan Osborne in Nebraska, Brian Bangs in South Dakota,
I got Brian
and then
scheduled,
oh, good, good, all good guys, and then of course Ty Pinkins down in Mississippi. You
and
got
I
to
got
get
Ty
Ty.
scheduled. I've
Yeah,
got him scheduled too.
I tell you, I think that same feeling like when you're back on active duty and you got your unit and everybody's just again a bunch of random people, but we're all doing it for the same reasons. The four of us, we got a text chat going where we do calls every once in a while. We're completing each other's sentences, and we could not be. Four totally different people, but we're all doing this for the same reason and grounded in the same set of values. And it's I tell you what, I very much enjoy uh, uh, fighting the fight with these three.
Well, you've got a good helper in Betsy because I'm telling you, she knows everybody. She
Yeah,
literally knows everybody.
Betsy's the best.
She and I were talking. My God, we go back 50 years. Can you believe that?
You guys were in ROTC together, right?
Uh huh.
That's
And we
fantastic.
met. Nobody introduced us. They kept telling everybody. She'd hear about me. I'd hear about you. And we literally met on the street. And I said, "Oh my God, you must be Betsy." So that's how we met.
That's good.
She's my
That's
bud.
good.
Our sons are born a week apart. And my son's born
Oh,
the day after her birthday.
that's great. I
So
love
yeah,
it.
we go way back. All right. Well, we will do what we can to help you. I hope you'll come back on after the spring fiasco called a primary, of which you can sit out and save your money.
Exactly. Yep. I'm just gonna
And
watch it.
don't watch it. Be out there working them lines while people are doing it.
Fair enough.
So
You're absolutely right.
there are
Yep.
a lot of independents that get in there, and that's how Bernie and Angus did it. Although I'm mad at Angus right now. I might get over it. I don't know. I have to think about it. I'm still mad at him right now. And by the way, what did you think of when we ended the government shutdown of 8 Republican senators enriching themselves at the tune of a $500,000 per cell phone?
Just another example of the corruption. I mean, for goodness sake, guys, come on.
How could other senators vote for that?
Yeah. And how could they allow that to be in there, right? Uh,
Well, I
yeah,
just want them to know that if they're getting these strange phone calls, I would be the one responsible. I told everybody to get their health care bill and call their senator who's on the list of 8 and tell them, hey,
yeah,
with that money you just absconded with, would you pay my premium for the year?
yep, yep,
That would be Mamaw.
yeah. I mean, my opponent, Jim Risch, net worth of $55 million, but he's been in politics for 50 years. So how did that happen? And he continues to cash his Senate check on top of this massive net worth that he has. Why? I mean, any Idaho University would be happy to have a little
Yeah,
extra
any
in their
kind of help.
endowment. Uh,
I don't
you
know
know,
how in the world they get by with thinking that the Treasury is their personal slush fund.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's about service, right? I
it
mean, we're
is.
talking about
Miss
service.
Lindsay forgot.
Yeah,
That's what breaks my heart. Lindsay was in the military, for God's
yeah.
sakes. Oh, well, Lindsay has other issues. You can deal with that when you get in there. Well, Todd, I will let you go. And everyone, again, this is Todd Achilles, who's running for Senate in Idaho. And if you're parsing around your dollars and supporting good candidates that help us out in the United States Senate, give Todd some help. So thank you very much, Todd.
Well, thank you, Mamaw. I appreciate it very much. It was good to hang out with you.